Let me ask you something. What if, in just 15 minutes, everything you are, a father, a husband, a hardworking American, was stolen from you? One moment, I was a man living my life. The next, I was a monster in handcuffs, my face pushed into the hot asphalt. They didn't see a person. They saw a stereotype. This is the story of how the system tried to erase me, and how the one voice they never expected to hear became my only hope for survival. This will make you question everything you think you know about justice. And let's get to the beginning of this story. But first, make sure you're already subscribed to the channel, because the next videos will be a series of content that will blow your mind. I just stopped to unload my cargo. 15 minutes later, I was in handcuffs, face down on the hot asphalt, with no idea what was happening. Look, I'm not the kind of guy to spin a yarn or embellish a story. I'm just gonna tell it to you straight, exactly how it went down. My name is Frank Miller. I'm 48 years old, and for 20 of those years, I've been a long-haul trucker. I've never had a problem with anyone. I wake up before the sun, sleep in this cab, eat cheap burgers at truck stops, and thank God every single day for the life I have. It's a tough life, sure, but it's an honest one. On that particular day, I was rolling into a distribution center just outside of Chicago with a full load of soybeans I'd picked up in Iowa. I'd driven through the night to make my delivery window. You know how it is. We truckers can't afford the luxury of a good night's sleep when a deadline is ticking. 16 hours straight, man, only stopping for gas and a lukewarm coffee to keep my eyes open. I pulled into the city around 7:30 in the morning. The traffic was already starting to build up, that endless line of shiny sedans with folks in suits heading to their office jobs, AC blasting. My GPS led me to this huge warehouse in an industrial park. It was one of those massive modern places, covered in security cameras with guards in a little booth at the gate. Nothing I hadn't seen 1,000 times before. I backed my old Peterbilt, my faithful old Bessie, that's taken me to every corner of this country, right up to the loading dock. She's not new. She's got her share of dings and scratches, but she's never once let me down. I killed the engine, grabbed my bill of lading, and hopped out of the cab. I was wearing the same clothes I had on for 2 days. A faded John Deere t-shirt, worn-out jeans, and a pair of old work boots that feel like heaven after so long on the road. I hadn't taken 3 steps toward the office when I heard the shouting. "Police, get on the ground. Hands where I can see 'em." It happened so fast, I couldn't even process it. The next thing I knew, 3 squad cars were blocking the entrance to the lot, and about 6 officers were pointing their guns right at me. Man, my heart leaped into my throat. "Whoa, officers, what's going on?" I tried to ask, but they didn't even let me finish. 2 of them rushed me, throwing me to the ground so hard I felt my chin scrape the pavement. The heat of the asphalt burned against my cheek. One of them dug his knee into my back with so much force, I thought my spine was going to snap. "Shut your mouth, you scum. We got him. The bank robber's this one." One of them yelled as he cuffed my hands behind my back. The cold metal of the cuffs bit into my wrists way too tight. I was in total shock. What robbery? What in God's name were they talking about? I had just gotten into town. I tried to explain, to tell them who I was, but my voice was drowned out by the click of handcuffs and the cold, hard certainty in their eyes. They weren't looking for a person. They were looking for a monster, and for some reason, they had just decided it was me. "Officer, for the love of God, I'm just a delivery driver." I managed to choke out, the taste of dirt and asphalt in my mouth. "I just got here from Iowa with a load of ... A sharp shove to my shoulder cut me off. "Shut it. We know exactly who you are. Your picture's been all over the precincts since this morning. It was then that a cold dread, deeper than any fear I'd ever known, started to creep in. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. The commotion had drawn a crowd. Warehouse workers, office staff in their clean shirts, even other truckers waiting in line, all of them were staring. Staring at me, the grimy trucker pinned to the ground like some cornered animal. The shame, man. It was a physical weight. Can I at least get my documents? I pleaded, my voice cracking. Everything's in the truck. A bill of lading, my license. My company ID, ... double quotes, another shove. You'll have plenty of time to make up stories at the station, pal. As they hauled me toward the squad car, I saw one of the officers climb into my cab, my home on wheels, and start tearing it apart. Another. One grabbed my backpack, the same one my wife Linda bought me for our anniversary 5 years ago. It had everything in it. My blood pressure pills, my worn-out leather wallet, the little photo of my kids, Sarah and little Mike, and the St. Christopher medal my mom gave me for protection on the road. They tossed my bag into the trunk of their car like it was garbage, and then shoved me into the back seat. By this point, I was crying. Not from fear, you understand, but from pure, raw indignation. What was happening? Why wouldn't anyone just listen to me for 1 second? Inside the car, I tried one last time. Sir, my license is in my back pocket. My name is Frank Miller. I work for Heartland Transport. I left Des Moines 2 days ago. I have a wife and 2 kids waiting for me at home. The officer driving glanced at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes as cold and empty as a winter sky. He had already made up his mind. Is that right? He said with a cynical smirk. And I suppose you can prove you were in Iowa, and not right here in Chicago at 5 a.m. this morning, robbing a bank? My stomach just dropped. A bank. They thought I, a 48-year-old trucker with a bad back and 3 herniated discs, had robbed. A bank. Yes, sir, I can. I said, my voice filled with a desperate hope. I have fuel receipts from the truck stops. The truck's GPS tracker will show my whole route. The toll booth cameras. The other cop just laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Yeah, and you've also got the same gray hoodie we saw on the security footage. The same scruffy beard, and even the same slight limp. You really thought you wouldn't get recognized in a city with this many cameras, buddy. That's when the world stopped. They were confusing me with someone else. Some criminal who just happened to look like me had robbed a bank this morning, and I, poor old Frank, just had the rotten luck to have his face. The squad car peeled out, tires squealing. Through the side window, I watched old Bessie, my truck, get smaller and smaller. It was like my whole world, my entire life, was shrinking in the rearview mirror, and all I could do was watch it disappear. As I watched old Bessie disappear, I knew it wasn't just my truck they were taking. It was my whole life, my freedom, my name. I've faced down blizzards in the Rockies and driven through storms in Tornado Alley, but I have never, ever felt as powerless as I did in the back of that squad car. When we pulled up to the precinct, it was a madhouse. Someone must have tipped off the media. Reporters were already there, a swarm of them, with flashing cameras and microphones shoved in our faces. Is that him? Is that the bank robber? They shouted. One of the officers, puffed up with pride, practically paraded me out of the car. That's him, he answered. Caught him trying to flee the state in his rig. In that moment, with all those cameras flashing, I knew my life was over. Even if I proved my innocence later, the image of Frank the trucker, bank robber, would be plastered everywhere. My reputation, my good name, built over a lifetime of honest work, was destroyed in 30 seconds. The police station itself was a loud, chaotic place that smelled of stale coffee, sweat, and cheap disinfectant. They shoved me inside like a sack of potatoes, still in cuffs, my shoulders screaming in pain from being held in that awkward position. Inside, it was like I was the grand prize in a raffle. Cops were high-fiving, slapping each other on the back like they'd just taken down John Dillinger. "We got the guy from the first national heist," one of them yelled. They sat me down on a hard wooden bench against a grimy wall. A detective in a rumpled suit, a guy named Kowski, walked over. He looked me up and down with this expression of pure disgust, like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. "So, you're the genius who thought he could get away with it, huh?" I tried again, my voice trembling. "Sir, please, my name is Frank Miller. I'm a trucker. I was just getting into Chicago from..." He didn't even let me finish. "Shut your mouth," he snapped, his voice like gravel. "I ask the questions here." I swallowed hard, my cheek burning with humiliation. It had been 30 years since anyone had spoken to me like that. "Full name," he commanded. "Franklin James Miller," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. "Franklin Miller matches the ID we got from your wallet. Now, where did you stash the money, Frank?" "What money? For the love of God, I haven't stolen a dime in my life." "I have. A family, a mortgage. I've never even had a speeding ticket." Another cop came over holding a piece of paper. "Look here, detective. Security photo from the bank. It's him. Same beard, same dark jacket." He turned the grainy image towards me. It was a man from behind, wearing a dark hoodie and a ball cap, walking into a bank. You could tell he was a big guy and bearded, but you couldn't see his face at all. "That could be anyone," I protested. "You can't even see his face." The detective just smiled, a cold, chilling smile that made my blood run cold. "Doesn't matter, pal. The witnesses already picked you out of a photo lineup. We've got 3 bank tellers who confirmed it was you." My heart sank into my boots. A photo lineup? How? How could they identify me for a crime I didn't commit? This had to be a nightmare. It just had to be. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying that when I opened them, I'd be back in my cab, parked at a rest stop. But when I opened them, I was still there. "I get one phone call, right?" I asked, my voice thin. "That's my right. I want to call my boss. He'll tell you I was on the road." Kowski chuckled. "Look at that. The trucker is a lawyer now. Knows his rights and everything." Still, after making me wait for what felt like an eternity on that hard bench, the cuffs digging into my skin, they finally let me make that call. That one single call that I prayed would clear my name and end this whole nightmare. That one single call that I prayed would clear my name and end this whole nightmare. It felt like my only lifeline. They didn't give me my cell phone back, of course. They marched me over to a grimy landline phone in the corner of the booking room. A cop standing right beside me, listening to every word. I dialed the number 4. Heartland Transport, a number I knew by heart. My hands were shaking so bad, I could barely press the buttons. Donna, the dispatcher, picked up. "Donna, for God's sake, it's Frank Miller," I said, my voice choked with desperation. "They've arrested me here in Chicago. They're saying I robbed a bank. I need to talk to Mr. Peterson now." There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. Then she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Oh my God, Frank, what happened? It's all over the local news radio." My heart sank. "The news? Already? I didn't do it, Donna. I swear to God, they've got me mixed up with someone else. Please, get Mr. Peterson. Tell him to get a lawyer down here. Anything. Tell him to show them the truck's GPS records. It'll prove I was on the highway when it happened." She said she'd talk to him, but I could hear it in her voice. That hesitant tone. Mr. Peterson was a good boss, but he was a businessman first. He counted every penny. The thought of him spending money on a lawyer to get one of his drivers out of a jam. It felt like a long shot. After I hung up, They took me to a small, windowless room. They finally took the cuffs off, but only so they could take my mugshots. Front, side, holding that little sign with a number on it. Me, Frank Miller, a husband and a father, a trucker for 20 years, being photographed like some hardened criminal. I have never felt such shame in my entire life. Then came the fingerprinting. They smeared my fingers in that foul, black ink, the officer complaining that my prints were smudged. Of course they were. My hands are calloused from gripping a steering wheel and tying down tarps, not from shuffling papers. Press harder, you idiot, he yelled, grabbing my hand and slamming it onto the paper. Then they made me strip. I had to stand there, naked, in front of 3 strangers, while one of them shined a flashlight at me, making me turn, squat. The humiliation was so complete, I couldn't even cry anymore. I just obeyed, numb, like a machine. They gave me a bright orange jumpsuit to wear. It smelled of mildew and despair, and it was too small, squeezing my shoulders. And that's when it truly hit me. I was going to jail. Me, a man who wouldn't even harm a fly, was about to be thrown in a cell with real criminals. I started shaking uncontrollably, my teeth chattering. I was sweating, but I was freezing cold. All I could think about were my kids. How was Linda going to explain this to them? Sarah and Mike are teenagers. They'd understand more. But the shame, what would they tell their friends at school? Sitting in that cold room, in that ridiculous orange jumpsuit, I felt like the lowest form of life on earth. Not for anything I'd done, but for what was being done to me. When a guard came to lead me away, I saw the lead detective, Kowski, walking down the hall. "Detective, please," I begged. "Just look at my truck's GPS log. It will prove I was in a different city when the bank was robbed." He didn't even look at me. He just nodded to the guard. "Take him to the transport van. Time to go to Cook County." Cook County Jail. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't a nightmare anymore. This was real. This was happening. This was happening. And let me tell you, what happens after you're processed and thrown into the system is a whole other level of hell. The county jail is the loudest, most silent place on earth. It's a constant roar of shouting, slamming steel doors, and guards barking orders. But in your own head, there's this deafening silence where all your hopes used to be. The next morning, a guard tells me I have another phone call. My heart leaps. It's gotta be Mr. Peterson. He's seen the GPS data. He's got the lawyer. This is it. It was him on the line, his voice sounding distant and strained. "Frank," he started, "this is a real tough situation." I started rambling. "Mr. Peterson, thank God, you just have to show them the truck's GPS logs, the toll receipts. It proves I wasn't there." There was a long pause. A pause that told me everything I needed to know before he even said the words. "Look, Frank, I'd like to help. I really would. But you know how it is. The company. We're going through a rough patch. I can't afford to get tangled up in expensive legal battles right now. And frankly, our company's name being dragged through the mud, associated with a bank robbery. It's not a good look." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "But you know me, sir. You know I'm an honest man. You can't just leave a father of 2 to rot in here for something he didn't do." His reply was the final nail in the coffin. "I'll see what I can do, Frank. Maybe talk to our accountant, see if he knows a cheap lawyer. But I can't make any promises. Things are tough for us too." When I hung up that phone, I knew I was on my own. But "I'll see what I can do" was the corporate version of "you're dead to me." A few days later, a public defender came to see me. A young guy named Davis, looked like he hadn't slept in a week, drowning in a cheap suit and a stack of files. He sat down, glanced at my file for maybe 30 seconds, and got straight to it. "Mr. Miller, I'll be blunt. I have 50 other cases just this week. The DA has 3 eyewitnesses who picked you out. You have no prior record, so we can probably get a deal. You plead guilty, you'll likely get 4 to 6 years, maybe out in 2 with good behavior. I just stared at him. But I didn't do it. How can I plead guilty to something I didn't do? I have proof, the GPS, the fuel receipts, the toll cameras. He sighed, that tired sigh of a man who's heard it all before. And who's going to pay for the private investigator to gather all that evidence? The state isn't going to do it for you. The final blow came when I finally got to speak to my wife, Linda. I could hear she was trying to be strong, but her voice was breaking. She told me my picture had been in the local paper, and neighbors were whispering. And then she told me that our youngest, Mike, had come home from school in tears because a kid had called him the son of a bank robber. That broke me. Right there, in that stinking visitor's room, I broke. Frank, what do we do? She sobbed. I don't have money for a lawyer. I barely have enough for groceries. While I was rotting in that cell, abandoned by my company and a legal system that didn't care about the truth, my family was being destroyed out there. I wasn't just a number in a cell. I was a ghost, forgotten by the world, and my only crime was being a poor trucker who looked like somebody else. So, have you ever heard a story like this? Did you know it existed? Let me know in the comments if you've ever experienced this, or if you know someone you know who has. I'll help you out in the comments. My only crime was being a poor trucker who looked like somebody else. And when you're just a number, forgotten by the world, the inside of a jail cell can eat you alive. The days bled into one another. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The food was slop you wouldn't feed to a dog. But it wasn't the food that made my stomach churn. It was the knot of despair lodged in my throat. I shared a cell designed for 2 with 6 other men. We took turns sleeping on the cold, concrete floor, the stench of sweat, stale air, and hopelessness. It's a smell that gets into your clothes, into your skin, and I swear, it never leaves you. In those first few weeks, I was a ghost. I'd stare at the ceiling for hours, thinking about my family, my life, everything I had lost. There was a moment, a dark moment, where I thought about ending it all, just giving up. But then I remembered my father. He's the one who taught me to drive a big rig. He used to say, Frankie, a man can lose everything in this life, but he can't ever lose his dignity. That memory, that single thought, was the only thing that kept me going. I wasn't a religious man, not really, but in that concrete box, I started talking to God, not praying in the formal sense, just talking. God, you know, I didn't do this. I'd whisper into the dark. Please don't let my kids grow up thinking their dad is a criminal. Then one day, a new guy was moved into our cell. He was different. Quiet, wore glasses, had the look of a college professor. His name was Arthur. Turns out he was an accountant in for some white-collar tax. Thing he swore he was framed for. I don't know why, but we just connected. Maybe because we were 2 fish completely out of water. He was the first person who actually listened to my whole story without judgment. When I finished, he just looked at me and said, Frank, I believe you, and we're going to find a way to prove it. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, a tiny flicker of hope ignited inside me. Arthur explained that the system was broken, but it wasn't unbeatable. You need to make noise, he said. Get your story outside these walls. But who's going to listen? I argued. My family has no money. My boss abandoned me, and the public defender barely knows my name. That's when he had the idea. Do you ever listen to Midnight Ride on satellite radio? With that guy, Big Dave Callahan? Of course I had. Every trucker in America listened to Big Dave. He was a legend, famous for sticking up for drivers, for exposing the injustices we face on the road. We're going to write him a letter, Arthur said. If he reads your story on the air, it'll get attention. Someone who knows you, someone who saw you that day, might hear it. At first, it sounded crazy. What were the chances that a famous radio host would read a letter from a nobody in Cook County Jail? But then I thought, what do I have to lose? Arthur managed to get a pencil and some paper from a guard he'd befriended. And that night, huddled in a corner of the cell, we started to write. I'm no writer, but the words just poured out of me. I told him everything. About my truck, my family, the humiliation, the abandonment. Arthur helped clean up my grammar, but he insisted we keep my simple, direct way of speaking. That's what will connect with people, Frank, he said. Your honesty. When we finished, we had my entire life, my entire nightmare, written down on 2 sheets of paper. Now came the hard part. How to get it out of here and to the radio station. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot I had. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot I had. For 3 days, Arthur and I brainstormed. We couldn't trust the guards. They just tossed the letter. The public defender was a ghost. Then Arthur found our miracle. One of the inmates working kitchen duty had a cousin who was a mail carrier. The mailman would sometimes drop off personal items when he made his official deliveries. Arthur made a deal. The kitchen guy would smuggle our letter out, and in return, I promised that if I ever got out and back on the road, I'd give his son, who lived a few states away, a free ride home for the holidays. He agreed. The next week, my letter, my entire hope for the future, was smuggled out of that prison hidden inside an empty butter container. Now, all we could do was wait and pray. Those were the longest days of my life. Every minute felt like an hour. Did the mailman deliver it? Did Big Dave just throw it in the trash? Did anyone out there even care about one more guy in a jumpsuit claiming he was innocent? A week passed. Nothing. The little flicker of hope began to die. I started to think it was all for nothing. Then, on a Wednesday morning, the impossible happened. A guard appeared at my cell door, calling my name. Miller, you got a visitor, a lawyer. I figured it was the public defender, finally remembering I existed. But when I walked into the visitor's room, I saw a man in a sharp suit I'd never seen. Before, Mr. Miller, he said, extending a hand. My name is Robert Chun. I'm an attorney with the American Truckers' Justice League. We're here to take on your case. I just stared at him, confused. The Justice League? But I'm not a member. He smiled a warm, genuine smile. You may not be, sir, but your story has touched a lot of our members. Big Dave Callahan read your letter on his show yesterday morning. The station's phone lines have been ringing off the hook ever since. Truckers from all over the country want to help. My knees went weak. I had to grab the table to keep from falling. After all that darkness, a blinding ray of light. They believed me? I stammered. Yes, sir, they did, Mr. Chun continued, his eyes sparkling. And it gets better. A trucker named George, out of Indiana, heard the show and called in immediately. He said he was talking to you on his CB radio that exact morning. You were on Interstate 80, over 100 miles from Chicago, right around the time of the robbery. And the best part? He records all his CB conversations. He has the audio file that proves where you were. For the first time since they threw me on that hot asphalt, I cried. But this time, they were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. Not just for me, but for the strangers, my brothers on the road, who had reached out to save a man they'd never even met. My salvation hadn't come from a courtroom or a law book. It came crackling over a radio signal, carried on the airwaves by a community that refuses to let one of its own fall. And in that moment, I knew this fight was just beginning. In that moment, I knew this fight was just beginning. After my new lawyer, Mr. Chun, showed up, things started moving at a speed I couldn't have imagined. Justice in America is slow, like a heavily loaded rig climbing a steep grade, but suddenly, my case had a full tank of diesel. Mr. Chun told me Big Dave Callahan hadn't just read my letter. He'd dedicated his entire show to it. He started off by saying, "Folks, tonight I'm reading a letter from a brother on the road who could be any one of you. A hardworking man thrown in jail because of how he looked, because of his simple clothes, because of his profession. You need to listen to this because his story is proof that in this country, a working man doesn't even have the right to be innocent." That lit a fire under the entire trucking community. The station's phones blew up. Truckers were calling in, sending messages. Some even organized small protests, honking their horns as they passed by the courthouse. But George's CB radio recording was the bombshell. He was a guy who hauled frozen goods and recorded his chats just to pass the long, lonely hours. On that recording, you could hear my voice, clear as day. "This is Frank Miller in the old Peterbilt, heading east on I-80 with a load of soybeans. How's the road ahead, good buddy?" We talked about the weather, about the price of fuel, and I even mentioned I was approaching the Joliet Toll Plaza. Mr. Chun got that recording, and guess what? The Toll Plaza's electronic records confirmed my truck passed through at 7:15 a.m. on the day of the robbery. The bank in Chicago was hit at 7:20 a.m. It was physically impossible for me to be in two places at once. When Mr. Chun told me that, the relief was so overwhelming, I just broke down. It was the proof I needed. My voice, my own words, were going to set me free. But the system doesn't just open the doors and say sorry. Big Dave kept the pressure on. He had George on the show, played the CB recording on the air, and even had his producer call the toll authority live to confirm my passage. This is what they did to Frank Miller. He'd boom over the radio. An honest, family man treated like a monster because he's a trucker, because he doesn't have money for a fancy lawyer. How many Frank Millers are out there, rotting in a cell? While the real criminals walk free, my story went viral. Local TV news picked it up, and the national papers. Innocent trucker jailed in case of mistaken identity, freed by CB radio recording. The headlines read, "The public pressure was immense." Inside the jail, the word spread. The other inmates, even the guards, started treating me differently. I was no longer just another number. I was the trucker from the radio. My friend Arthur was ecstatic. "I told you, Frank. The voice of the people is the voice of God." The most emotional moment was when Linda finally came to visit. The truckers. Justice League paid for her bus ticket. Seeing her walk into that visiting room, looking so tired, but with a smile on her face, I almost collapsed. "Frank," she said, holding my hands across the table, "you have no idea what's happening out there. People are setting up online fundraisers. The church held a special service for you. And Mike, he tells everyone at school with pride that his dad is innocent and is going to be a hero." That's when I knew I wasn't fighting alone anymore. A month after my letter was read on the radio, the judge scheduled an emergency hearing. The courthouse was surrounded by dozens of truckers, honking their horns, holding signs that said, "Justice for Frank," and "Truckers aren't criminals." Mr. Chun presented all the evidence. The CB recording, the toll records, the GPS data he finally got from my truck. He even forced the bank tellers to do another identification. This time, without police pressure, two of them admitted they weren't. Sure, it was me. The prosecutor, who had been so sure of my guilt, just sat there, unable to even look at me. The judge, an old, weary-looking man, listened to it all and then said something I'll never forget. In our system, the principle is innocent until proven guilty. But in this case, there is no doubt. There is only the certainty of this man's innocence. Then came the words I'd been praying to hear. Immediate release. They didn't apologize. The state didn't offer a dime. But they gave me back my freedom. As I walked out of those prison gates, I saw a sight I will carry with me to my grave. A line of big rigs, horns blaring, and hundreds of my fellow truckers, cheering and applauding. My salvation was standing right there in front of me. My salvation was standing right there in front of me. Big Dave Callahan himself was there, microphone in hand, broadcasting live. He rushed over to me. Frank Miller, you've become a symbol for every trucker in this country. How does it feel to finally be free? I was so overwhelmed I could barely speak. All I could manage to say, with my voice thick with emotion, was, I just feel grateful. Grateful to God, to my family, to you, Dave, and to every single driver who believed in me when no one else would. It was their voices that saved me. But getting out of jail isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning of a different kind of prison. The first few nights back home, I'd wake up screaming, drenched in a cold sweat, thinking I was back in that cell. Every time I saw a police car, my stomach would twist into a knot. I, a man who once drove 16 hours straight without a complaint, could barely leave my own house. The doctor said I had PTSD. He prescribed expensive pills we couldn't afford and said I needed therapy. Therapy? How is a blue-collar guy like me supposed to pay for a shrink? Then came the next blow. Heartland Transport, my employer for over a decade, wouldn't hire me back. After all the news coverage, after my innocence was proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, Mr. Peterson refused to reverse my termination. I received a cold, formal email from HR due to the negative publicity surrounding the case and the potential impact on our company's image. We cannot offer you re-employment. I just sat there, staring at the screen. My life's work thrown away like trash. The negative publicity was their fault, not mine. They were the ones who abandoned me, who refused to lift a finger to help. The anger started to burn away the fear. Anger at the whole system that had chewed me up and spit me out. I was 48 years old, a father of two, jobless, traumatized, and with a reputation that, despite everything, was still stained. Who was going to hire an ex-con, even an innocent one? The little money we had was running out. The bills were piling up. Just when I thought we were going to lose everything, the phone rang. It was a guy named Sal, an independent trucker who had been part of the protests. Frankie, it's Sal. I got a big run to Miami, more than I can handle alone. You want to ride shotgun with me? We'll split the pay, 50-50. I almost cried. It wasn't just the money. It was a chance to get back on the road, to feel useful again, to feel like me again. I'm in, Sal. When do we leave? Tomorrow morning, partner. The next day, I was back on the highway, wind in my face, the roar of the engine in my ears. For a few hours, I forgot everything. But when we pulled into a truck stop, the real world came rushing back. A young kid at the fuel pump was staring at me. He whispered something to his coworker. I braced myself for the pointing, the suspicion. But what happened next blew me away. Hey, you're Frank Miller, aren't you? The guy from the news? I tensed up, ready for the worst. Man, what they did to you was just wrong, he said, shaking his head. My dad's a trucker, too. We were all rooting for you. The other guy came over, hand extended. It's an honor to meet you, sir. You're a hero to us. I didn't know what to say. It was the first of many moments like that. At every stop, someone would recognize me, buy me a coffee, or just give me a thumbs up. Sal explained it to me. You don't get it, do you? Your story is all over the trucking forums, the social media groups. You're a legend, man. You became the cause for every driver who's ever been judged by how they look. My private hell had turned into a public crusade. After that first trip with Sal, other calls started coming in. Independent drivers, small companies, all willing to give me a chance. Then, Big Dave called again. Frank, guys from all over the country want to help. They've started a GoFundMe to get you your own rig. I thought he was crazy, but I had underestimated the brotherhood of the highway. In less than a month, thousands of drivers had donated. They raised enough to buy me a used but solid Kenworth W900. When they presented it to me, I just wept. I had lost everything, and now my brothers and sisters of the road were giving me a new beginning. They had painted a phrase on the side of the truck: "The road belongs to those who fight." That truck wasn't just a machine. It was a symbol that, together, we are a force that can't be ignored. Well, we're almost at the end, but first, I noticed you haven't liked this video yet. This is very important for YouTube to continue promoting our content, and we'll continue to help you. So please like this video. It's free, okay? Continuing ... that truck wasn't just a machine. It was a symbol that, together, we are a force that can't be ignored. 5 years have passed since that day. 5 years since they tried to strip me of my name and my dignity. And sitting here today, in the driver's seat of my own rig, yeah, she's all mine now. Paid in full, I can tell you that life has a funny way of coming full circle. They judged me for my worn-out clothes, my tired face, my old truck. They forgot that behind every steering wheel is a human being. That was their mistake. They thought we were all the same, just faceless figures you see on the highway. They never thought we had a voice. After I got my Kenworth, the Blue Rose, as I call her, I started working for myself. It wasn't easy. Fuel costs, repairs, chasing, down payments, ... But I was my own boss. I was free. But I couldn't escape my own story. Everywhere I went, someone would recognize me. Hey, you're Frank Miller. It was strange. I never wanted to be famous. I just wanted to be respected. One day, a call came from a national truckers union. They wanted me to speak at their annual conference in Nashville. Me? Speak in front of a crowd? I barely passed English in high school. But Big Dave, who had become a good friend, pushed me. Frank, your voice needs to be heard. It's not just your story anymore. It represents everyone. So I went. I stood. On that stage, my hands shaking, in front of 1,000 other truckers, and I just told the truth. I told them about the cell, the fear, the shame. But I also told them about the letter, about George's CB recording, and about the community that saved me. When I finished, the whole room was on its feet, and I understood it wasn't for me. It was for them. They saw themselves in my story. After that, the invitations kept coming. I even ended up in Washington, D.C., testifying at a congressional hearing on wrongful convictions. Me, a trucker from Iowa, in my best work shirt, speaking to all those politicians in their $1,000 suits. I looked them right in the eye and said, "You'll never understand what it's like to be a working man in this country until you listen to us. You'll never know the terror of being innocent when no one believes you." Even with all that, I never left the road. But now, I have another job besides hauling freight. Along with some other drivers, I started the Highway Justice Foundation. We raise money for lawyers to help other working people who've been railroaded by the system. We've already helped get 6 innocent people out of prison. But you want to know the moment that really mattered? Last year, my son Mike, who's a teenager now, had to write an essay for school about his hero. He wrote about me. Not because I was on the news, but because, he wrote, after everything the world threw at him, my dad stayed an honest man and never stopped fighting. When he showed me that paper, I cried like a baby. That was the real victory. They could take my truck, my job, my freedom, but they couldn't take my son's respect. The jail is in my past, but the lessons are with me on every mile I drive. I learned that justice doesn't always come from a courtroom. Sometimes it comes from the calloused hands of your brothers and sisters who refuse to stay silent. I learned that a man isn't measured by his bank account, but by the strength he finds when he has nothing left. And most of all, I learned that being a trucker isn't just a job. It's an identity. It's a brotherhood. So if you're listening to this, and you've ever been judged by your appearance, by your job, by what's on the outside, I want you to remember this. Your dignity is not for sale. Don't you ever let anyone tell you otherwise. We are not invisible. We are the backbone of this country. We keep it moving. And we all have a voice. My voice, thanks to God and the good people of the road. Nobody can silence it now, Doc. Thank you for watching this far. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to keep receiving future content. See you in the next video.